Okay, today we're going to talk about simplifying radicals. You might want to take out a piece of paper so that you can write some things down as we go through this if you chose not to print out the notes that go along with it. To simplify a radical, what you're going to do is find the factors of the number under the radical sign. One should be a perfect square. You're going to take the square root of the perfect square and put it in front of the radical. You're going to multiply it by any number that's already there. For variables, which means letters, even exponents get cut in half. Odd ones you need to write as an even exponent times the letter. So if you were given x to the fifth over here, we would go down one and make that an x to the fourth times x to the first, because 4 plus 1 is 5. X to the fifth is x to the fourth times x. Then you're going to take the even one out and leave the odd one under the radical sign. So a quick review of perfect square roots. Hit pause if you don't remember these. You need to sort of memorize all of them. The square root of 1 is 1. The square root of 4 is 2. The square root of 9 is 3. The square root of 16 is 4, etc. We are going to be looking for these numbers here as factors when we're trying to reduce the number. So if we look at the first example, I'm going to start with the number. You're going to say to yourself, what's the square root of 49? Hopefully, you realize the square root of 49 is 7, so I'm going to put it out front. Then we're going to look at the first variable. X squared, 2 is even, so we're going to cut it in half. So that becomes x to the first. We can cross that out. Then we're going to look at the y to the ninth. The 9 is odd. So I'm going to rewrite that as y to the 8th, I go down 1, times y to the 1st. Half of 8 is 4, so we can cross it out and put a y to the 4th out front. So now if I look, I have a 7, an x, and a y to the 4th in front of my radical, and I am left with a y to the 1st, or just a y, under the radical. That is your final answer. That is simplified. If I look at the second example, the first thing we're going to do is square root 32, or find two factors of 32. Hopefully, you came up with 16 times 2. Then we're going to look at the first variable, x to the third. A 3 is odd, so I'm going to go down 1, x to the second, times x. Then I'm going to look at the y. This is a 7, so we're going to go down 1, y to the 6th, times y. Now I look at what I have under my radical. The square root of 16 is 4, so I'm going to put a 4. There is no square root for 2. X squared, we're going to cut in half and put x to the first, or just x. A 1, you can't cut in half. Y to the 6th becomes y to the 3rd. Now if I multiply what I have in the front, we get 4x y to the 3rd. And if I look under the radical, I still have a 2, an x, and a y. So I rewrite that as 2xy. That is simplified. Couple more examples. First thing I notice here, I'm going to rewrite the 3 out front because I don't have to do anything with that. The second thing, my 8, factors of 8. Hopefully you pick 4 times 2. Then I'm going to look at the a. That's a 3. So I'm going to go down 1, a squared, times a. The b has a 5. That's odd. Go down 1, and then a b. Now if I look, the square root of 4 is 2. There is no square root for 2. Half of 2 here is 1, so a to the first, or just a. I cannot do anything with this a. Half of 4 is 2, so this becomes b squared. I cannot do anything with the b. If I multiply everything in the front, 2 times 3 times a times b squared, that becomes 6ab squared. Under the radical, I am still left with a 2, an a, and a b. If I look at the second example here, again, the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to rewrite that -2. We want to think of two numbers that multiply and give me 300. The largest perfect square is 100, so I would do 100 times 3. The x squared, that's even, so immediately I'm going to cut it in half and put it over here. The y to the 5th, I'm going to rewrite as y to the 4th times y. And the z to the 7th, since it's odd, I'm going to go down 1 times itself. Now, if I look at what's under the radical, the square root of 100 is 10. There is no square root for 3, so I'm going to leave it. Half of 4 is 2, so this is y squared. The y stays. Half of 6 is 3, so that's z to the 3rd. And the z stays all by itself. If I multiply what I'm left with in the front, I get -20 x y squared z to the 3rd. And under the radical, I have a 3, a y, and a z. The other thing I want to show you is how I could do that if you didn't pick the numbers I picked. So if I want to simplify, just because some kids think there's a magic number to pick, there's not. If I were simplifying a 300, let's say you didn't realize that it was 103 and you chose 50. Okay? 50 times what gives you 300? 6. You can't square root either of those numbers, so we would break down the 50 to 25 times 2, and I would break down the 6 to 2 times 3. The square root of 25 is 5. Hopefully you realize 2 times 2 is 4. The square root of 4 is 2, and I still have a 3. So in the front, I have a 10. Under the radical, I have a 3. That is the same, 10 radical 3 is the same as my 10 here and my radical 3 here. So if you don't pick the largest perfect square first, you just might have to break down the two factors a second or a third time. It doesn't matter how many times you need to break it down, as long as you end up with the simplest form, in this case 10 radical 3. Please email me any questions or write them down and ask me next time I see you.